Hey, John Harris here with the Rock Metal Podcast. Join me as we get to go behind the scenes into what goes into producing records and making music as we interview some of our favorite and soon-to-be favorite bands. Today we're chatting with Niilo Sevänen of the band Insomnium. For fans of Omnium, Gatherum, Dark Tranquility, and Amorphis, we'll be chatting about Insomnium's new album, Anno 1696, mixed by Jaime Arellano of Orgone Studios and mastered by Tony Lindgren of Fascination Street Studios. We'll get to hear the story about how all of that came to be, living a life filled with passion, and so much more. So please stay tuned to the very end. But first, let's check in with our beautiful sponsors. Asher Media Relations, doing public relations for everything loud. For your band needs to be seen and heard in print, online, and radio, head over to AsherMediaRelations.com. That's AsherMediaRelations.com. Mention the Rock Metal Podcast and get your band noticed. Syndicol Music is a full-service agency for musicians offering record label services, marketing, branding, production, and management. Head over to syndicolmusic.com. That's syndicolmusic.com. SYNDICOL music.com. Mention the Rock Metal Podcast and take your music career to the next level. Niilo, thank you so much for coming on today. Go ahead and say hello to all of our beautiful listeners.
Hello, this is my pleasure.
Absolutely an incredible pleasure to have you on. Now, Niilo, this album, Anno 1696, what was the greatest moment for you producing this record?
Probably when it was finished, finally, because the process was long. We recorded 11 songs, 75 minutes of music, and the mixing process, well, it took a while, mastering on top of that. So it took something like, 3 to 4 months that we very intensively worked for the album. So when it was finally ready, of course, the feeling was good. We were satisfied with everything, how it sounds, how it came together. And now the feedback is starting to come in. People have heard the song. Some of you guys have heard the whole album and read the story, and people seem to be enthusiastic. So looking good at the moment.
Absolutely. And we're going to get back to that story in a little bit. The greatest moment for you producing the record was finally finishing it. It was a long process, 75 minutes of music. You mentioned that the mixing process took a while. What was the intention, if that makes sense? What was the intention with the mix?
It makes sense because we had a vision there. The story required music that is very cold, dark, kind of harsh, even blackened, at least on our standards, some black metalish influences. And compared to the production of what we had with Hearts Like Grave, we wanted it to be a bit more raw, organic, maybe a bit more 90s. So we found this guy, Jaime Arellano. He's from Colombia, but he's been living in UK for a long time, and he has done albums for Paradise Lost, Moonspell, and many more. And we really like those albums and the sound he has been doing. It's not a modern metal sound that would be kind of too compressed and too Pro Tools and polished. It's more organic and it sounds more real, and that's what we wanted to achieve, and that's what we thought will fit this album now. That's why we chose that guy.
Yeah, and by that guy, Jaime Arellano has worked with Paradise Lost and Moonspell. You liked those albums, and you felt, we don't need any more Pro Tools. We don't need any more compression. We want a more organic, more real sound, which I appreciate totally 100%. And the story itself, Anno 1696, required music, and it does. I read the short story. It requires music that is cold, dark, harsh, and blackened, as you said, by Insomnium standards. Now, you mentioned that it was a long process to work on the album. What was the biggest challenge for you on this record, Niilo?
Well, since it's a concept album and I was in charge of the lyrics and, of course, the story is mine, so it's a bit more trickier than your standard album where you just have a collection of songs and stories. But if you have a bigger story that spans the whole album, you really have to think carefully how the arc goes and the song order and how do you. So you have to build it differently. It's a more delicate process. So, and you have to pretty early kind of lock that this song is going to be number one now, and this is going to be the last one, because the story has to start and end in the right way. And so it is more complex to build a concept album. But if you do it well, I believe it's very rewarding for the listener, because I like concept albums, and I think all in this band we like concept albums. And
yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned the story a couple of times, and in that response, you mentioned Niilo having to, or getting to rather, write the story and then write the lyrics and build the concept album with the story arc. And part of me wants to say, well, that sounds so easy. You know the story, you know how it's supposed to go, but that obviously isn't that easy. And reading the story and reading the lyrics, it's like, I just want to say, you're a genius. Like, how did you do that? And it's not every day that I get handed a short story to talk about an album. So let's maybe take a couple minutes and talk about this story. What was the inspiration to go this direction?
Yeah, we've done this before, that we have a short story with the album with Winter's Gate. And I think with that, we kind of bought our artistic freedom, so we can do what we want, and we don't have to be afraid. We can try things. And now I had this idea already in 2019 about this story set in 17th century Europe. I talked it with the guys back then, but then COVID started, messed up all the plans. We ended up doing this EP first. But already at that point, we had the idea that this concept album is next. And it's going to be the EP was kind of soft, mellow collection of ballads, so to say. But we knew the next album is going to be more brutal and dark again. And I finished the story quite early then. And the guys ready, they liked it. And we agreed, okay, let's make the album from this story now. And then we really started composing music that would fit this story. So it really became a soundtrack for this specific story. It's not just a collection of songs or a collection of random ideas, but like most of the music is composed after the story was finished. And I think you can hear it. And like we have 4 composers in the band, but the story helped us kind of get into the same mood and mindset when making music. And so it all came together then after that quite easily, that all the songs that all the guys were bringing to the table, they already sounded like, okay, this will fit the story. There were only like a couple of demos that we kind of left out, that, okay, let's see with the next album, maybe this fits better there. But yeah, originally this idea, where it came from, like I've been a fan of 17th century history for some time. It's a really, really interesting period, kind of era, between eras. Kind of, there are a lot of conflicts there. There are wars. Religion and science are fighting. The witch hunts are there, and then there's happens to be this very cold period as well. Like it's one of the coldest centuries of what we know, and what actually caused this great famine in the north, this great hunger in 1696-97 was there were some volcanoes erupting, at least in Iceland that we know, which caused that climate was in the north was, well, fucked up for a couple of years. It was really cold. All the harvest was gone. People had nothing to eat. It was a total disaster. So very dark times, proper material for a dramatic story. So I think that's how it started in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Good material for a nice, proper Insomnium record, you could say.
Yes.
Man, volcanoes in Iceland going off. Yeah, I remember reading something about that in the story, which is, and then I read that a lot of the stuff that we're reading in the story, so we know or is told, actually happened, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, like although these incidents and facts that are mentioned and these persons, they are real stuff from history. And I did quite a lot of research to like get the facts right. And it was funny thing. Yesterday we had an interview here in Finland. There was a journalist, and then there was a historian from the university who had read the story. And she said, actually, the lyrics are so good that she will use them and show them to her students, because they represent the 17th century world so well. And I was like, wow, well, this is the best compliment like ever. And thank you. Like, I have the stamp of approval now on my short story that it's good stuff.
Okay, well, there you go. That's the best compliment I think anybody could receive.
Yes, it is. I'm really, really happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the more organic sound, the more 90s-esque sound, we talked a little bit about the mixing, but I was actually curious, thinking as we were chatting, did any kind of equipment in the studio change, like when you guys were recording or writing the record to at the source, get more of a 90s sound?
Well, with the drums, for example, Jaime Gomez Arellano, he doesn't use samples at all. So they are real drum sounds. And that's kind of rare nowadays. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with guitars. It's the single we recorded ourselves in the studio. So they are not reamped guitars. And that is also starts to be rare nowadays. Like usually all these star producers, they have their own kind of standard drum and guitar sound. And then all the albums they make, they sound a bit the same because of that. But now we actually already in the studio, we spend a lot of time to have the best possible drum sound and the best possible guitar sound. And it wasn't changed afterwards to something else, which has happened many times. But now we knew what it's going to be.
And it's amazing how much this has become not the norm in metal. You don't have any drum samples on your record. They're real drums. And even the guitar takes are as they were, out of the microphone and into the preamp. It's super cool to have a vision like that, to say, hey, let's kind of go back to the 90s a bit. Something more raw, something more organic. More to come, but let's go ahead and check in with our beautiful sponsors. Two Madsen is responsible for producing, mixing, and mastering some of the best metal for over the last 20 years. From Meshuggah to The Haunted to Poison Black, Kemper Profiler packs for guitar players, and Easy Drummer expansion packs for programming drums. Two Madsen can take your production to a level previously unheard. Head over to twomadsen.com. That's twomadsen.com. TUEMADSEN. Click contact. Fill out the info for your next project, and let Two know that the Rock Metal Podcast sent you. Wormhole Death is a modern record label, publishing, and film production company born in 2008. Getting signed to this label means global distribution, publishing, and marketing with Wormhole Death's roster of global partnerships. Head over to wormholedeath.com, that's wormholedeath.com, submit your band, and let them know the Rock Metal Podcast sent you. How would you define success at this stage of your career?
That I can do what I really love for living. It's how I spend my days. That is how I define success. Because if I would be a multi-billionaire, I would still do the same thing. I would write stories and I would make music because this is my passion. So I'm very fortunate. I know it. And for a band to get this far, you need luck. There are many good bands that for many different reasons they just don't get anywhere, or they end up quitting or whatever. But we've been here 26 years, and still I feel we have a lot to give. We're going. I feel we're going forward, and there are still places where we can go. Like South America, we haven't been there, and it's something, of course, I still want to experience. And there are still people out there who haven't heard of Insomnium, so there is something we can still conquer. But success is how you spend your days. Like, it doesn't matter how rich you are, but if you have to do the kind of work that you don't like, you have to spend all your waking hours doing something you don't actually like. What do you do with all that money? Like this kind of freedom, and you can do what you really love. That is, I think that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's why they end up spending all that money on silly, frivolous things that get them into trouble.
Yes. And kind of trying to fill some void inside. That's, of course, not going to solve the real problems.
No. Yeah. No. 26 years, man. Okay, you're making me feel old now, Niilo.
Sorry.
I remember seeing The Elder on Yahoo music videos or something. So back in the day before YouTube, really, I used to watch music videos on rotation on Yahoo. And I remember The Elder came up and I was like frozen. I was like, this is what I've always ever wanted to hear. What is happening here? And then I went to Amazon because, you bought CDs back then. I went to Amazon and bought the CD, and it's kind of like the rest is history, right? But from The Elder to Lillian, 26 years, getting the chance to do what you want to do. What's that like? What kind of advice maybe would you give your younger self who is recording The Elder? Like, is it kind of even impressive to you? Like, the guy who was sitting there recording The Elder is now able to do this for a living 26 years later?
Yeah, I don't know if the younger Niilo would believe that. Because back then I didn't even have this idea in my mind that I could do this for a living. It was so far away. We were just a young band. We were students basically, and of course the idea was to study and get a normal, decent job and go on and have this band hobby there. But at some point, when things progressed, we realized, okay, we can actually make a living with this. So it seems. So the tours got bigger and bigger, and we got more fans, and it all happened slowly. But message to younger Niilo, I don't know. Try not to stress too much about everything. That's probably.
Yeah, pace yourself. It's kind of like you mentioned earlier. There's a lot of bands that just for whatever reason don't make it or they quit or whatever, and then here you are 26 years later. So just do what you love and pace yourself, and Yeah,
that is very important. Like do what you love and be really honest and true to yourself always when doing the music, and that is the key. Like if you try to calculate, if you try to please people or do radio friendly or if you think about that too much, people will sense it and it doesn't feel so real. And so be true to yourself and really do what kind of music you want to do. Of course, that applies to everything in life. Like life is so goddamn short. Do what you want, and that's it. Really, because you're not going to get a second chance.
No, absolutely not. Life is so goddamn short. Do what you want. Have passion. And yeah, like you mentioned, 26 years ago, just a student studying to get a normal, decent job. Things progressed. Tours got bigger and bigger. You made more money. You started to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah.
Very cool. What's the number one thing that you would like people listening in to do? Is that head over to a particular website, watch the music videos, read the short story? What would you like? What's the number one thing you want people to do? It could even be a soulful message like be happy.
Well, that's my message to everyone. Like Bill Murray said, that life is so goddamn short. Do what you want. But like if somebody doesn't know Insomnium, I think it's easy way to start is to go check out some of our music videos from YouTube and see if you like them or not. And that's a good place to start, of course. And nowadays, of course, Spotify and other streaming platforms, it's easy to find our stuff there and check them out. And lyrics are also listed in the internet in many places, so you can read it easily there. But so it's easier nowadays than in the 90s to find new music and all that cool stuff.
Don't have to wait out for MTV to come around with the music video anymore.
Yeah. Then you have the recorder ready. Like, there going to be some cool video, and I'm going to record it now, and it was so different.
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you, I even miss it a little bit myself.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, go ahead and head over to therockmetalpodcast.ca for today's show notes. There you'll be able to see music videos, links, transcript, all the extra goodies from today's episode to make sure you can go ahead and stay in touch with everything Insomnium. And if you've never heard of Insomnium before, then go listen to the freaking record. All right. Well, Niilo, thank you so much for coming on today to the Rock Metal Podcast.
Thank you. It must be my pleasure.
That's it for this episode of the Rock Metal Podcast. Stay tuned because next week we're going to be chatting with Fleur Jansen of the band Nightwish and her new solo album, Paragon. She decided to take a more pop-infused approach musically on the record, opening herself to both pop and metal fans alike. Go ahead and hit subscribe in your podcast player, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next week.